about Morgan, you tell us more about HaloPSA?
Thanks, Cory. Yeah, so hi everyone, thanks for joining. I think I saw a couple of names in the chat that I recognized. For those of you that haven't heard about HaloPSA, or maybe you have but you don't know much about us, the first point that I'll mention is we've actually been around for a really long time. So while we are considered the sort of new kid on the block in the PSA space, we've actually been around for about 30 years. So formerly a company called HaloPSA, building and working on a Windows-based application. Around about 4 or 5 years ago now, we took that 25 years worth of functionality and moved it all over to a React-based web application. And that's really worked in our favor and in yours, because the result of that is this really mature, feature-rich system, a very powerful engine under the hood, while at the same time a sleek and responsive front-end experience. We're a global company, so as I mentioned, I'm here in the southeast of England, where our main headquarters are, but we've got offices just north of Seattle and in Melbourne as well, serving thousands of MSPs at this point. And we've really had some phenomenal growth in the last few years. But despite that phenomenal growth, it's actually all been completely organic. So the same two founders of the company that set NetHelpDesk up 30 years ago, the same two owners of that company today. And that's something that we're committed to, maintaining. You can see that based on the recent clauses we've added into our agreements, noting a 10-year commitment to staying independent. In terms of the tool itself, fully fledged PSA platform, managing the entire customer lifecycle, everything from lead generation and e-signing of proposals all the way through to automated billing, and of course that ongoing service functionality that we'll be taking a peek at today.
Thank you, Morgan. I'm going to just back up real quick. When I forgot to record, and when I started recording, it stopped sharing. So I'm not sure where that cut off, but did we see this slide? So here are the panelists. Here's where you can get the slides. And I think that we're going to show these slides here actually as well. So before we start, this webinar will be recorded. It is being recorded. I can confirm that now. Make sure to use the Q&A feature to drop your questions. Or you could use the chat, but the QA keeps it a little bit more organized, and we really hope to address those at the end. Please add any and all questions you have. That's how we can get the most value out of this sort of webinar. We'll answer them at the end. And again, you can get these slides by scanning this QR code right here, and that will email Eric at simplesat.io. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to Mendy.
Yeah, that's the plan. Give me 1 second. Let me launch my screen share.
All right, I think we're good.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I'm Mendy. I'm the consultant, founder of Rising Tide Consulting Group, formerly at an MSP for 13 or so years, and have gone through basically every role in that MSP, from tier 1 to tier 2, tier 3, and then director of technical services, and finally CTO, before I went out and did my own consulting. That's a quick intro of me. If you don't know me, you can find me on MSP Geek, and we can talk there. But I don't really like to talk about myself, so I'm going to skip over all the rest of the stuff. In regards to this presentation, like, one of the concepts I wanted to introduce is something that we know, but we don't necessarily put into words, is that the MSP life is special. We always find ourselves in the middle, like we always find ourselves taking it from both sides. We have to keep the customers happy while working with the vendors. We have to work within the customer structure, executive team, and their employee team. And so I'm basically rebranding MSP from managed services provider to the middleware services provider. And we want to talk about what challenges an MSP has that we have to deal with. And the idea is that we take those challenges and we come up with KPIs that we can use to measure how we're doing in those areas, so that we can find ways to improve and eliminate or make those challenges easier. So the challenges that we've focused on, there's obviously a lot more than these, but these are some of the top ones. Is number one, finding and retaining talent. Are your people happy? Are they do they want to stick around? And are you staffing the right number of people? Are they overworked? Do you need more people to help with the load and things like that? How can we prove our value to our clients? This is a very common question that comes up. Like, oh, we want to make sure that we're giving reports to the customers so they can see that we're doing. We've got to prove our value to them. There's a lot of talk about whether or not that's even the right mindset, where the customer should come to a point where they rely on you more like a utility and less of a repairman. So it's not about them being happy with their value. It's just that you're a necessity that has to be there. Again, just constant things that are going around in the community about like how we can manage our clients' satisfaction and value, making sure that we're actually doing what we should be doing. Are we spending our time efficiently, right? So this is another challenge that we have. Like, are we actively making sure that it's similar to how making sure we're staffed with the right number of people, but it's also just because you have the right number of people for the amount of work that's coming in doesn't mean that you're actually efficient with that work that's coming in. So you could have like hundreds of password requests coming in a day, and you could have enough staff to handle those password requests. But does that mean that you're efficient if all you're doing is spending time on password reset requests? It doesn't make sense necessarily. And so if there's like a problem user or problem device, that could impact your efficiency. So that's why we're calling it out separately. Are we spending our time efficiently? And then are we delivering the quality of service we want to, right? So that comes back to SLA tracking and making sure that we're responsive and resolving those tickets in time. And then finally, of course, from a business perspective, are our profit margins healthy? Are we making the money that we should be making? So these are the challenges that we decided to pick on that MSPs constantly deal with. And we came up with these KPIs that we can use that will give us the ability to measure and track how we're doing with these challenges. So the effective hourly rate is basically how much time, what is your per hour rate if you were to bill hourly, right? So everyone who does all you can eat contracts, they don't necessarily track, are you actually making enough? People are like, oh, recurring revenue, that's the way to go. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're being profitable. You could only be making, like $10 an hour, depending on how much time you're spending on that flat rate that you have for that customer. So effective hourly rate will give you a metric to make sure that you're actually billing the right amount, and will give you guidance on whether or not you have to increase your monthly contracts, or if you're charging too much, and maybe you can come up with some sort of budget plan with the customer to put funds back to them, back into the infrastructure, which really just helps you in the end. Anyways, backlog time is another one, right? So question of do you have enough people to handle the workload? If you set an estimated amount of time per ticket, some people go 15, some people go half an hour, some people do 45 minutes. Some people classify by ticket type, and they can set estimated time by ticket type. But it's literally just simple math at that point. Track the total number of open tickets, multiplied by, sum the estimated time for all those open tickets across the board, and then take your working hours by the number of agents that you have, and making sure that you have more working hours or close to the same number of working hours that you do have time required to close those tickets or work those tickets. Efficient time use, right? Just because you have technicians that are working for you doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually doing work, number one. So we want to make sure that they're tracking time. And that can be billable time, it could be non-billable time. We're not necessarily going to get into that right now. But the bottom line is you want to know what they're doing so that you know whether or not you need more people or whether or not your people aren't working a full day. So that's the tracked time over available hours. That's the percentage. And then, of course, you've got that was agent utilization. The next one is efficient time use, is where we talk about whether or not that time is actually billable that's being tracked, right? Because in the end, you have to check it goes back to the effective hourly rate. In order to do effective hourly rate, you got to go based off billable time against the customer's contract to make sure that you're being profitable on that agreement. And if you're not tracking any time that's billable against the contract, then you don't know what that effective hourly rate really is. And so this is where efficiency comes into play. So you want to make sure that you're recording billable time that then gets covered by the agreement, and then you can take that billable time divided by available hours and seeing like how effective is your billability, like what's the percentage of your billability rate. And then we want to talk about like customer satisfaction, right? So in order to know how well you're actually doing, you need to know, are you really collecting feedback? So you can be like, oh, I have 100% success rate, but only one person ever answered the 1,000 requests I sent out. So you want to know what's the response rate. So that's the received feedback over the sent feedback. And then you want to know the actual satisfaction, what's the positive feedback over the received feedback. And those two go hand in hand to make sure that, number one, you know how engaging you are with your clients, which also talks about your partnership level. If they're not want to engage with you, they may not like you, point blank. And so you have to figure out like what's wrong with that relationship to see if you can fix it. Nobody wants to deal with a vendor that they don't like, right? But everyone, if you're friends with them, then suddenly they don't mind engaging. And so therefore they're more likely to respond to you and get you involved in projects before it's too late. So it all goes hand in hand in that relationship. And then finally, the kill rate is another important KPI. It's a very popular KPI. You've probably all heard of that one already. It's just basically tickets closed versus tickets open. So are you basically flooded, right? This is a very high level metric. It doesn't necessarily give you proper utilization because you don't know how much time it takes per ticket necessarily, and it's different for each ticket. So that's where the backlog time may come into play. Like if you have estimated time per ticket type, that may be a more accurate metric of the kill rate, but the kill rate will still also tell you whether or not you're just like taking on water or whether you're staying afloat. It's a very high level quick check. And then finally, we want to know about quality. How many tickets are being escalated? Are people holding their weight? Do we need to invest in training and things like that? So these are basically the measurements that you would use to build these KPIs. And we can go and talk about these in a little bit more detail. So we talk about agreement profitability. The industry says that your effective hourly rate should be 2 or 3x the hourly rate of the person doing the work, right? So this is where you want to make sure that you have the cost of your people put down somewhere that you can use in calculations, and then you measure that against how much time is actually being billed and your effective hourly rate. And your effective hourly rate should generally be 2 to 3x the hourly rate of the person doing the work. Your agreement profit margin is calculated based off your agreement amount minus your cost of goods sold. So that's like your agent costs, any other rolled in product costs that you have, plus your labor costs, and then making sure that you want to cover your overhead. And then finally, invest in training, because training is something that will improve profitability. It improves quality of service. It improves efficiency of the technician. Bottom line is like the less time they spend on tickets, the more profitable you are. And the less time they spend on tickets, the more efficient you are and the more work they can do and the happier your clients are. So it's a huge win for that. And so people are like, oh, I don't need to invest in training. They're too busy to train, or it's not worth it, or no one wants to learn, or they're going to leave anyways, right? There's all sorts of reasons why you shouldn't invest in training that are not necessarily true, or basically ignore the real reasons why you should invest in training. So we want to make sure that's covered as well. And then just a thought, like when you're talking about effective hourly rate, if you go too high, you may want to consider lowering that slightly so that you stay competitive. And if you're too low, obviously you can't necessarily sustain the business on that rate. So you don't want to go for like crazy high. You don't want to go like 5 or 6x. If you're doing that, you may want to come up with either pay your people more so they stick around, or provide better service or something else to even that out. We're talking about time utilization and efficiency. Like we all know, there's only 8 hours a day, more or less 8.5, 7, depending on who's working and depending on the area or so. But let's say there's only 8 hours a day, right? What is the minimum amount of time that we can expect to work on a ticket? And we're not talking necessarily about closing a ticket, because there's times you can't close, like we can't estimate how much time it takes to close the ticket. But generally speaking, we know that if someone's touching a ticket, they're going to be spending at least 15 minutes on that ticket, right? And so if we take 15 minutes, how many tickets total can they really be working on a day if there's only 8 hours in that day? And so again, that's just simple math that we can use to come up with some metrics to figure out what's going on.
I have one question, Mendy, about
Yeah.
like, do you have like general benchmarks for agent utilization and efficient time use?
Not really. And
Okay, I'm
like
just
this is
curious.
something
We
that
don't track those at Simplesat, so I'm
Yeah.
just curious what. Yeah.
Yeah. So within the MSP, like IntelliComp was an MSP that I left and went into consulting from. So there we were tracking, like we wanted to touch at least 20, 25 tickets a day. And we had we wanted to make sure there were 7.5 hours recorded. So we did have metrics within the MSP, but in terms of like a general recommendation for the public, it's going to be completely up to the MSP based off the type of work that they're doing and the type of tickets that they get and the skill of the people and things like that will basically come up. So you want to build a trend. You want to start tracking that information so you can build a trend. And then the idea is it's a never-ending journey of continuous improvement, right? So whatever you're at right now, just push the envelope a little bit. And then that becomes your new trend. And then push the envelope again. And then that becomes your new trend. And then keep going until you're continuously improving, right? If you're not tracking any hours right now, and then for you to come into your MSP and say, hey guys, from now on, we need to track 7 hours a day, every single day, your technicians are going to revolt. It's just, there's no, like, they're going to be like, oh, what is this? Micromanagement, Nazi, whatever. Like, it's just not going to work. So what you do is you start off and say, okay, we need to at least hit 5 hours or 4 hours, right? Come up with a reasonable number, just push it a little bit. And then after 6 months or so, when you show them that, hey, it actually is possible to get there, it's not that big of a deal, just add another 2 hours to it or another hour to it until you get to the point where you're literally have all 8 hours a day tracked, or at least 7.5, you know? So yeah, it's going to be different for each person, and you just have to build your trend and then work through it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Very helpful. And then we have some people in the chat here sharing their benchmarks and their numbers, which is great. So everyone, please keep participating in the chat. This is really helpful. Thanks.
The other stuff here on the slide is pretty self-explanatory, right? We want to make sure that in order to be able to build metrics off them, we need to know what the real working hours are per agent. So make sure that's tracked somewhere. And then we start tracking to see, okay, like, is the time being logged close to the amount of working hours, right? How much time of the time logged is allocated against the customer agreement versus non-billable, like internal stuff. And so there's actually, Kyle Christensen did a video recently who one of the things he mentioned, which I liked a lot, was what you'll find is your lower level tiers will likely have a higher, or should have a higher amount of time marked as billable against an agreement. And the higher level tiers, who are going to be like training or dealing with knowledge base write-ups or other stuff internally with the MSP that they'll be helping with, will likely have a smaller amount of percentage that's billable to the agreement. So that's something that you want to keep that in mind as well. So there's a question, but we're doing questions at the end, right? So we'll come back to that question.
Sure, unless it's easy to answer. Yeah, we can queue them up for the end. So.
Yeah, so I mean, like the short answer is that you want to track both the actual time and then the agreement time is where the rounding should happen, right? So like, if you're doing rounding because that's your billable time, that's the rounding that you want to happen. But in terms of the hours that you're spending, you want to make sure the actual time is tracked as well, so that you can determine the amount of hours that are really being spent against the amount of hours they should be working. And when I say real working hours here at this point, I'm not talking about actual time spent, really. I'm talking about how much time they're supposed to be in the system, right? So a technician may have 8 hours a day, but some technicians may have 7.5, some may have 6 if they're part-time or something like that. So we want to know what each person should be working somewhere so that we can go then check the tracked time against that number. But in terms of the question specifically, like when we're tracking time, we do want to track both the real time, the actual time that was spent, and then let the rounding happen on the system side when it gets calculated for billing. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we have, in terms of customer satisfaction, there's like this Twilight Zone thing that people kind of ignore, and they just assume that if you're a noisy customer, you're not necessarily happy, and everyone else is happy. And it's not really true. The Twilight Zone is where you want to be with your customers, right? If you're a customer that's too quiet, likely they have a misunderstanding of how the relationship is supposed to work. And so they're not getting you involved in things where you should be, which causes friction later on down the line. likely they don't feel like they're getting value for the amount they're paying that month. And so, they're probably going to wake up one day when you do hear from them, it's going to be like, hey, we got an audit and nobody likes, like the audit shows all the things wrong with our environment. And so we're going with a different company, right? So you don't want to hear from them when they're telling you that statement, right? You want to hear from them more often than that. So we're looking for the healthy customers, the ones in the middle, the ones that aren't too quiet, but the ones that are not too noisy. And the ones that are too noisy, like we have similar kind of reversed problems there where expectations aren't set on how things are being done. Constant problems are coming up, and so they're always unhappy. There's the reverse of that friction exists. So we just want to point out, like, what we're going for when we're looking for healthy customers is in between the quiet and the noisy customers. And then I got some slides here. We have too much noise, so we can establish a standard trend on tickets by type, vertical, etc., so that we can understand when something's abnormal, right? So the first question is, how do we know when someone's too noisy or too quiet? Well, build that trend across your ticket base to find out how many tickets per customer, per vertical are coming in, right? So if you have, let's say, nursing homes, and nursing homes generally make 100 tickets a month, and you have a nursing home making 600 tickets a month, you obviously have an unhealthy or noisy customer there. Something's wrong. And if you have a nursing home that's making 10 tickets a month, then it's not like everything's perfect over there, right? There's something wrong there too. You got to go dig into that. So abnormally high ticket volume means you're wasting time paying extra attention to that user, device, or customer or issue, which cuts into efficiency. And that point, it's either because they have some process or something that's causing an issue, some sort of friction that makes a lot of tickets, which means you literally just have to raise the rates for them to make back the effectively rate on that, or they have some sort of problem device that they haven't approved replacing, right? In which case, it's very likely worth it for you to go in and replace that device for them for free. It improves the relationship with the customer. You show them that you did something for them and they feel really good about it. And then you also cut down on noise coming from that device or system that frees up time. So it seems like you're putting an expense out there, but in reality, you're making it back in other areas. A user having a repeat issue, right, also costs you, and it costs the client as well. So that's something that you can have a conversation with a client and say, hey, this one person has constant issues with this type of thing. And obviously people are going to jump to, like, what are they going to do? Get rid of their user? Like, yeah, sure. Firing the user and replacing them is definitely one of the solutions that may come up. But what we want to focus on is potentially bringing in training around what area on the job, like, why is it happening? Maybe maybe the system the person's using is bad. Maybe they're the only person who uses that system. And then we can talk about migrating that system to something else more modern or easier to use. Maybe that person just needs more training. And so focusing on the good side of improving that user, it can help you as well. Even if they're like, well, it's not really what we do. Well, yeah, it's cutting into your profits, right? So it's cutting into your ability to service the customer. It's cutting into your customer satisfaction. And so it should be something you do, even if it's not normally part of your service stack. And then we've got the breakdown of not enough noise, right? The same trend that we've established will point out those clients that don't have enough noise. Do they really value the relationship? Do they know what the relationship's supposed to be used for? Do you have all your tools rolled out? Like, is there training on how people should be reporting issues to you? Are there issues that you don't know about because you're focused on the noisy customers, right? So having those noisy customers can even cause the quiet customers because they feel like you're never around because you're always focusing on the other ones. So it's really a complete thing. You got to focus on both. When it comes to, like, your price, this is something that people always talk about, like, oh, I don't know, I can't raise my prices too much. Like, the clients are not going to pay for that. Obviously there's some truth to that statement, but if you show your value, you become critical to them. If you become their utility and not just the repairman, your cost becomes irrelevant. Like, they don't care how much you charge as long as you're proving value and you're making their business run, which essentially is what we should be doing. Like, technology is it's literally all over in every aspect of the business. We should be more or less engaged in everything that they're doing. Here's some ideas on ways to enhance existing value with your agreement that'll allow you to tighten up that relationship with the customer and prove yourself worthy of being that partner. And then there's some ideas of adding new value so that you can increase those prices and show why we're increasing those prices. I'm not going to go through all of them. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory on the screen, but they're also fairly common. There's nothing new or crazy here. And we are at Q&A. Right on time, I think.
Great. Thank you, Mendy. Very helpful. I hope that was helpful for everyone else. I think, should I just take over again? Why not?
Sure.
All right, let's do some Q&A. Please load up the chat or the Q&A thingy. We'd love to answer some questions here. Any questions for Mendy or Morgan or Hannah or Simplesat? Let's see.
Yeah, I suppose now would be a good opportunity to answer Vicky's comment in the chat. And we'll see in a moment. We'll take a brief look at Halo and some of the mechanisms in which you can return reports. There is an online repository of about, I think it's about 700 reports now. So there's a great sort of breadth of different KPIs to be reported on there, but everyone does track things in a slightly different way. And there is a bit of a barrier for entry, I suppose, when it comes to the reporting capabilities in Halo. But that is what the people like Mendy and I and the support team at Halo are here to sort of be the human schema, so to speak, and amend those reports accordingly.
We have another question from Kristen. You see that, Mendy? How do you track all of these metrics in one place when you are working at an MSP?
Yeah, so the bottom line is like most, if not all of the information should be available within the PSA. So the tickets that people are recording, that's going to be the actual hours versus the billed hours. The hours that are billed gets covered by an agreement. So all that information is in the PSA. It just takes math and reporting to get it out. At the time, there was a product, MSP CFO, that does a really great job of pulling that information into essentially a CFO level report that will give you those details. It also allows you to track within that product, and also most PSAs as well, including Halo, allows for you to put in the agent cost so that you can do that math within the report itself. The Halo timesheet. And Morgan, this may be a time to like share Halo screen so we can go through and show it, but like the timesheet shows how many hours an agent's been logged into the platform, as well as the working hours, as well as the amount of hours tracked. So most, if not all, the metrics that we're talking about are available within the PSA, at least in regards to Halo, and in most PSAs as well. Yeah, so here are the timesheets that Morgan is showing, and you can see the logged hours. The target hours is going to be the hours based off work, their work hours set. And then the hours worked is going to be how long they've been in the platform for, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of these, Morgan.
Yeah.
And the hours logged is how much time has been tracked on the system.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I suppose to just sort of echo what Mendy's saying there, whether it's Halo or any PSA for that matter, your team should be spending as much of their day inside the PSA as possible, and hence this timesheet should be as close to complete as it can possibly be. And then that having that and all of the invoice and agreement data in the same place allows you to pull the profitability out accordingly.
Yeah, which you have some reports to show us, right?
Yes, yeah. Are there any other questions that we want to go through beforehand?
I had one question myself about how to raise rates for noisy customers. Like I know at Pronto Marketing before, we just touted like a unlimited everything, unlimited support requests, limited tickets and stuff. But you do get the noisy customers, and you need to have that hard talk. Like, what do we do? I mean, do we just eat it up, or do we try to become more efficient, or do we raise the price? Like, how do MSPs deal with that?
Yeah, that's a hard question as well in terms of, and I mean hard, I mean it's a very well debated question across MSPs. Everyone does it differently. The one I like best and the one I prefer to use is where if you have a problem client because of something like too much noise or whatever, just show your numbers to the customer. Like, here's the number of tickets you're making. Here's the problem. Either we work to resolve this problem, or we have to raise rates to make you profitable for us, or we can hand you off to another MSP, right? And so that level of transparency, keeping in mind that we are the middleware, right? The middleware services provider. So we're not trying to be a black box. We're not trying to hide anything from them. Our goal is to show the customer that we're there for them. And ideally, the customer is not one who wants to rip you off, right? So if they do, then there's a cultural problem or mismatch, and you want to hand them off anyways. But bottom line is that you're in there to work together as a partner. And so show them what's going on and have that conversation. It becomes much easier and less difficult for you to go to them and say, you're causing us more work using these 3 things, like these, for whatever reason, like here are the reasons why. And so therefore our options are either 1, figure out how to resolve that more work to become back to a normal level. 2, increase your rates so that the work that you claim is critical that we have to do is now worth being done. Or 3, figure out how to get you to a provider who can help you out because we can't handle it.
Okay, that makes sense. I think our support team hates me. I like noisy customers because it means that they're helping us grow, you know, whether it's an enterprise customer and then we're not ready for them or something like that. But okay, great.
Yeah.
Let's do one last question from Peter here. Have you found that the profitability per tech is showing improper data for hours and rates billed against MSPs versus how much the monthly cost for MSPs? Can you see that there in the chat, Mendy?
Yeah, I'm reading it. I'm not sure I fully understand it. Tech spent 100 hours on an MSP in a month at $100 an hour is $10,000 versus their monthly contract's $8,000, right? So you have to, so Peter, this comes into like, as you build a report, you'd have that calculation in there. That comes back down to where you're subtracting labor costs from them. And so you have to make sure you're including the billable hours based off the rate of the hours. Or really, it's not even about that. It's more about the effective hourly rate, right? So if they're spending 100 hours on an $8,000 thing, so you take, I think I got this right, 8,000 divided by 100, or 100 divided by 8,000 to get your effective hourly rate. And so the question is are you billing that customer at an hourly rate that's 2 or 3x what you're paying the technician? So, you know, the way you're looking at it could come out the way you're describing, but that's one of the reasons why we don't look at it that way. Instead, we focus on effective hourly rate, if that makes sense, I think.
Understood.
Perfect.
Okay.
Cool.
I'm going to do a quick announcement, very important announcement, before we jump into a demo. And while we're doing this in the demo, please keep the questions coming. I think we could probably answer a few more at the very end. So before we get into a demo, just want to share our next, let me launch this poll real quick. Launching the poll. Okay. Our next webinar is on Wednesday, October 11th. We're going to be joining with Life Cycle Insights, all about QBRs, just 100% QBR focus. So in the poll here, this is where you can register for that. And will be super easy to just get you in the system and have the invite sent out. For anyone watching this recording, you can register by scanning this QR code. So I'll let that poll just be open, but now Morgan, you can take over and just give us a demo and highlight everything that we've been talking about and making it real.
Yeah, so I suppose there's 2 core aspects to consider based on everything that Mendy's mentioned, and it really boils down to the internal tracking of those metrics and then the external presentation of them. So we'll take a look at the external presentation first, and I think it's super important to have this kind of philosophy, and you know, the whole concept of QBRs is based on this, and it's this idea of returning justification as to why the customer has chose you as the MSP. Now, that can be implemented into Halo by including dashboards on the self-service portal. So I also like the idea of Halo returning real-time data. So you don't have, your customers, more specifically, don't have to wait for the next quarter to get an understanding of their ticket trends or their service desk KPIs, or even have to wait until the end of the month. They can come into the self-service portal and check in on that information in real time. There's just a couple of example reports that I've put in here. If anyone doesn't have these reports or these dashboards and they want to further discuss how to add these in, or they want the code, the SQL behind this data, I'll pop my email in the chat towards the end of the webinar. But yeah, so this is a way to, in real time, justify your worth and your value to your customers directly. And, you know, touching on Mendy's point as well, we could even expose in sort of company-wide ticket trends in here. This is your percentage of all of the tickets logged this month. And so then you can start to show those noisy customers directly to them and open up that conversation from a data-driven approach. And that's certainly something that I would appreciate. The other side is the internal tracking of that data. So there's a couple of mechanisms in Halo that we can make use of, touching on what Mendy has discussed. The first one that I'll mention is this sort of timesheet module, and the fact that the MSPs team can or should be tracking their entire day and mapping their entire day out in Halo. And they'll be doing that primarily from tickets. Now, whether that's a project or an incident or an alert, they'll be going into the respective area of Halo, where in here, we have these buttons along the top. So these are referred to as actions in HaloPSA, and they constitute the types of activity that can be performed on a ticket. Where here we have our timer, which is constantly ticking up behind the scenes as soon as the ticket screen itself is opened. So that can automatically tick up, or I can come in here and manually override that time. So that's where we start to build out the utilization for your agents. It's all based on the activities that they are adding onto those tickets throughout the day. In terms of specifying the time as potentially being billable or going towards the customer's agreement, that's all based on this charge type option, where we're saying here, we're constituting the different charge types that could be applied to this individual time entry. So at the minute, we've got no charge here, but the default option within here could be based on the type of ticket that we're working on, the individual action that we are performing. So it might be that private notes are not billable, but anything external that the customer can directly see would be billable. Or it could be based on the individual agent who is performing the action. So it might be that, you know, you've got your level 1, 2, and 3, and they all have their own unique rates, and you can then tie those rates back to your agents against their details here. Also, something else that Mendy mentioned that I don't actually see as many people using as I think should be using it, and that is this cost per hour. And this is where the labor cost is really going to be coming from. When we have a look at some of the reports that are in the system, it's all tying back to this agent cost per hour. So you might have your report set up perfectly, but if this is 0, then all of the report data will sort of fundamentally be skewed. And that touches on another point, which I like to bang on about when I'm doing implementations with customers, and that is the importance of not only effective reporting on data, but furthermore, the correct configuration within Halo to facilitate that. The prime example is if you have one ticket type, you don't have the concept of an incident versus a service request, you don't have any sort of categorization, it's going to be very hard for you at the end of the year to get a breakdown of the different types of tickets that have come in throughout the year. So that goes hand in hand of setting the PSA, whether it's HaloPSA or any other PSA tool, the concept of setting that up from a configuration perspective correctly, and also reporting on the data points that you want to report on. Because if either one of those two pillars fault crumbles, it's going to bring the other one with it. So once you've sort of set up the configuration of your actions and your charge types and your agreements, you'll be able to then subsequently report on that data. And I've put a dashboard onto the home screen here with a couple of reports based on some of the points that Mendy mentioned here. Now, it's not looking good for my dummy MSP, but that's because I don't have much meaningful data in here. But the point stands that we have our monthly agreement profitability, where we're looking at that exact formula that Mendy mentioned, namely your services and minus the cost of goods plus the labor rate. So it's the true profitability over time. Similarly, we've got that by customer here as well. We have our effective time, which is going to be the how much of the time that we're making use of is actually going towards any sort of billable time. So what's our effective rate going to be? And then I've put in here a first time fixed rate as well. And then we've got our actual utilization down here, again, looking at the hours that a particular agent has logged in the last week, the expected hours that they are going to be logging, and the tickets that are currently assigned to them. So this is going to allow you to see and distribute your workload effectively. And it all goes back to this point that the sort of the main thread of the whole webinar, where it's the data, you get the data out via the reports, you evaluate the data, you make decisions based on the data that you're seeing, and you repeat that and make sure that the line is constantly going up. And then, of course, down here we have our satisfaction. So, generally, how happy are the customers that we're serving? And that will allow you to make an important decision as well about, well, we're bringing in 50, 100 new customers each month, but they're all unhappy. Do we actually want to slow that process down and make sure the customers that we do have become happier? And there's that actually happened with Halo. I think it was last year now, where we found that the overall satisfaction of customers was decreasing, and the level of service that we were providing was decreasing because the throughput was too high. So we did exactly this. We extracted the data out of Halo, because we use Halo ourselves, and we evaluated that. We realized that it's going to be better for everyone if we actually reduce the amount of customers that are coming in, and the result was exactly that. Everyone became more happy, and it's now a more manageable process. So yeah, in terms of these reports, these are all sort of coming from the reporting suite in Halo. I mentioned earlier that we have this online repository, where at the minute, we've got just over 700 reports already in the system. And if anyone wants to not have to trawl through 700 reports and wants to drop me an email and say, Morgan, what do you think the best reports are for profitability? And actually wants the reports that we see in here for themselves, I'll put my email in the chat.
All right, thank you, Morgan.
Cool.
Sorry.
So, that's just a...
Go ahead.
Brief... No, sorry, Cory, go on.
Oh, I was just going to answer. There's a question from Brian here in the Q&A, something you were talking about previously. Is that burden rate or actually salary rate? The burden rate meaning salary plus benefits and other payroll expenses.
Talking about the agent cost field?
So I think so, yes. And the answer is either, really. The point is you need to be... Yeah, exactly. You need to be consistent with your decision. As if it's If it's going to be the burden rate, it needs to be the burden rate for everyone. And you need to make sure that in the reporting, you're understanding that that is the burden rate. If it's the salary rate, then you do the same thing, but with salary rate. The point is, when you really break it down, we're just talking about numbers and arithmetic. And yeah, so the importance there is consistency. It's not that using one or the other will break everything, but the inconsistency will. So I hope that answers your question, Brian.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Cool.
All right.
I'll hand it back over to Simplesat to talk a little bit about the satisfaction and how MSPs can use Halo and Simplesat together to drive that satisfaction. So I'll stop sharing.
All right, let's do it. Hannah, you ready?
Yes, Sam.
All right.
Thanks, Morgan.
Take it away.
Okay. So just to tie up with what Mendy mentioned earlier about like noisy customer, the quiet ones, how you can convert those into healthy customers. So in addition to, the metrics that you're generating or KPIs that you're generating within your PSA, you can also implement a survey as to why. The survey will actually give you an idea where exactly you need to improve on. So Mendy earlier mentioned about training. This will help you or give you an idea whether or not your technician needs to be trained or whatnot. So just to give you an idea what these metrics are. So for CSAT, this is the commonly used metric when it comes to ticket-related or support-related conversation. So CSAT measures satisfaction with specific interactions or experiences with your support team. So it is often used to evaluate the success of individual customer support interaction, the quality of specific product features that you have, or the overall satisfaction with a service. NPS, on the other hand, kind of focuses on overall customer loyalty. This is actually the best survey metric to use if you want to hear something from your quiet customers, those customers who don't often reach out to your support to tell them if they're experiencing any issues or whatnot, or are they planning to cancel or churn the next few months. So this gauge or give you an idea about the overall loyalty and also the likelihood of your customers to recommend you to other company or other customers as well. So word of mouth when it comes to ads. It also provides you an insight into customers' retention and growth potential. So in summary, both survey metrics are really important. So those can be valuable tools for understanding and improving your customer satisfaction and loyalty. And a lot of companies and organizations use them in conjunction to gain more comprehensive view of your customer sentiment and also the experience. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about more how Simplesat integrates with HaloPSA. So you can easily generate or add the survey as an embed into the closed ticket email. So once you do that, all of those data related to the rated ticket will be pulled via API. And these are the data as shown in the screenshot. You actually use in generate. For example, you want to identify the agent that are getting a lot of negative reviews. You can narrow it down per topic if you have that in your survey question. Then from that point, you can make a decision whether or not put that agent into a specific training in order to improve the support that they're giving your customer. On the next slide, this is more of like closing the feedback loop. So we also do have syncing the data back into Halo as a private note. And the most important one would be creating a follow-up ticket. So this is something that you can actually leverage if you want to understand and kind of like minimize those noisy customer. Proactive outreach to anyone who gave you like a negative or they're not pretty much happy with the recent interaction that they had with your technician. So you can have this integration activated, have a specific escalation team or like a manager proactively reach out to your customer to kind of like close the feedback loop, convert this noisy customer or unhappy customer into a healthy customer. Then on the next slide, it's more about reporting and properly handling your customer. So we can also sync the feedback data back into ticket custom field, which you can leverage in terms of generating report within Halo. So you can use that in terms of making, process updates, production updates, or support updates. On the other hand, we also do have user or customer custom fields. So this is something that you can adapt into your production. Like, for example, you can have your team check on those fields prior to like handling a new ticket submitted by that customer. And that way they have an idea what was the recent interaction of this customer, or how do they feel about, the last interaction that they had with us prior to this ticket. So if it's like showing negative data within those user field, you know exactly that, this customer needs to be taken care of. Like, you need to go extra mile in order to convert that past rating into a positive this time. So those are the things that you can, just some of the things that you can use in terms of improving your support interaction with your customers. Then next slide, this is going to be the last one. Of course, feedback is essential when it comes to companies' growth. So you want to take advantage of those positive reviewers that you have. So you can easily enable call to action buttons within Simplesat to increase your reviews in Google, Facebook, or any other review platforms that you have. So this will help you out in terms of SEO, visibility in the marketplaces and such. So that will be all.
Okay. Thank you, Hannah and
Thank
Morgan,
you.
for both of those amazing demos. I'm going to launch one final poll here. Launched. While we just review these, thank you slide here. So this last poll, a few more questions. How much did you get out of today's session? Please just answer this honestly. This is what we need to improve future webinars. And how would you like us to get, how can we help you? So you can get a demo from Simplesat, you can get a demo from HaloPSA, anything else. And so I'll leave that open here just for a few minutes. But thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, the panelists, for joining. I know I learned a lot myself. If you want to learn more, just scan these QR codes. For Mendy at Rising Tide, you can scan this to check him out on YouTube, or I'm sure you could just Google him. Or where did you say, Mendy? MSP Geek something?
MSP Geek, yep.
MSP Geeks. For HaloPSA, scan this for HaloPSA for a free trial, or just Google HaloPSA or Simplesat. You could find us, and Simplesat, you could book a demo as well. So thank you again. Yeah, go ahead.
I've also just put my email in the chat for anyone that wants to discuss the reporting in HaloPSA in more detail, and talk through the sort of dashboards that you'd want to see. So yeah, that's in the chat. Thank you very much, Cory.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, and it seems I'll kind of second that. It seems like there's a lot possible in Simplesat and Halo that that we could just help with. If you email us or create a support ticket, and like you saying about helping out with the right visualization, or we could help out with the APIs, whatever you need to send data to Halo. So don't be shy to ask, and we'll make it work for you. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I'm going to end this poll, and have a great day.